So yeah, what I want to do, hopefully this will be a nice, relaxing after lunch session, depending on what part of the world you're in. I don't have a lot of intense demos. We're just going to kind of look around and see what's happening in the community, and hopefully give you a little bit of a feel for some of the open source solutions that are happening spontaneously as needed by the folks that are interested. And so with that, I'll start to dive in a little bit here. Which of my screens? There we go. So first, I want to share some links, and as I say, my slides are mostly about links. So hopefully later on, if you want to look into some of the things here, you can dig deeper and ideally get involved. The first thing I want to show here is our exchange. You do first, if you haven't joined the exchange, you can jump down to join the community and get an ID and all that sort of thing. And if you're interested in just kind of poking around here and see what's out there, I've just hit the browse on the front page, and here's a place to just kind of look around and see what's out there. Strongly encourage you to scroll around, see what's there. There's all sorts of things from general tooling to specific format plugins to vulnerability checks, you name it. If there's not something there, this is a great opportunity for you to maybe start something that interests you. We'll come back to that. The other place to kind of get your toes in the water is to start on from the GitHub side. This is where all the source lives, and to reinforce the community is all open source. So all the things that are out here are free. Some are developed by us, some are developed by people outside of Sonatype, but either way, the code is all there. So I encourage you to look around at the various repositories. There's the standard GitHub tooling available for issues, checking of commits, what's happening, etc. Most all of them have a very helpful README up front, and you go through that, and that'll get you started. So there's kind of okay, he didn't say anything I'm interested in. Let me go find something on my own. Some important features of open source is there's kind of sometimes a concern of who do I talk to when I'm stuck, and with the community, it's really supported by the community. So there's a couple links here under the contact section. Our Gitter channels, Nexus OSS and Nexus developers, are a great place to just ask general questions. I would encourage you, if you're maybe starting a new project or looking for something specific that you didn't find by browsing, those are a good place to ask. Or if you've started a project and you've bumped up against a wall, go ahead and post a question on there. And of course, as I mentioned, the GitHub standard, create an issue in a specific project. If there's something there that you have interest in, go down that route. Okay. So one thing I wanted to address right up front, during our recent in-person meetup, it came to my attention that there's a number of folks who have found our community, have looked at some of the offerings that are up there, but were just plain worried about trying them out. And the best way I could summarize it was they were afraid if they opened the box, their warranty was void. If you have a professional version of a Sonatype product, if you've got Nexus Pro, if you're running IQ server, whatever, if there's a community supplied plugin, you should not be afraid to give it a spin. It's not going to nullify your support contract. As I said earlier, one other concern some people have is, how am I going to get support if I'm stuck? I refer you back to those other links, the Gitter channels, the projects themselves. the support is offered through the community, and just reach out. The worst case situation is if you have installed a plugin or some add-on from the community and it's somehow causing a problem. If you call into the support team for some other unrelated issue, not necessarily related to the community contribution, but something else is going wrong. Worst case, the team may ask you to remove that community plugin just to rule out that it's not the source of a problem. If it does turn out that, oh, okay, the community plugin is the problem, then you'll probably be referred back to the community and say, hey, the people that developed this are outside Sonatype, or it's not supported by our support team. So the best way to get some help is to go through those channels I mentioned earlier. A little blurb at the bottom of this, I mentioned, of course, try these things out. Don't try them out in production. Our product licensing allows you to spin up test instances, so don't feel like you have to live on that bleeding edge and try things out and take those kinds of risks. But so the big one, don't be afraid of it. It won't bite. If it does bite, it's easy to undo, and in fact, that's a great way to get started. If something's not working the way you anticipate, reach out. But for the most part, it's pretty smooth stuff. Okay, let's see. So what's our goal in the community? We really want to get the conversation started. We're not trying to dictate how code's written, what code is written, what projects are done. It's really up to people that have an itch that they would like to scratch. Again, I would encourage you to get involved by asking around. First look, if you don't find what you want, reach out on any of the Gitter channels, see if other people have started or are thinking about a similar feature or project, and then go with it. Don't bang your head against the wall too long. If you're on a project, go ahead and reach out and ask. It may be someone else in the community has an insight into some other way around the problem, and that can save you a lot of time. And also sort of advertise to the community what you're working on. Others may have an interest. They may want to pitch in. They may have suggestions for other directions to take. So, start the conversation and keep it going. The other thought here is it's also a place, if you don't necessarily want to start it yourself or build a new project yourself, chatting about it in the community, somebody else may want to take it up or add it to something that's existing. So you don't necessarily have to do it all yourself either. So the other thing I want to kind of push here is one of our definite goals is probably the goal is to get as much functionality open sourced as possible. We really see there's a benefit to everyone involved if we can get the code out there and more people can look at it and understand what functions or how things are working at their core, and being able to add, improve, change as needed because the code is open source. And so we're definitely trying to get as much open as we can. And so don't be afraid to chat about it. That's what we want. Let's see. Okay, enough rambling. Let's look at some of the projects. And it's interesting how some of the various projects evolve. Many of them are from a specific need that someone in the community has, and they may actually spark a discussion inside Sonatype where we say, hey, people are using this thing or asking for this feature. Maybe we need to productize that and pull it into the product itself and make it a part of the core system. So a few examples along those lines. I'll just jump into Nexus Repository Manager kondeh plugin here. Excuse me. So here's the GitHub project for the kondeh format. There's a bunch of links to learn more about kondeh itself if you're not familiar with it. But this is an example of a project that somebody needed. We put it together relatively quickly, and it's providing value. The source is all out here. The README shows you how to get started, how to build the bundle and install it in your repository manager instance, and set up a kondeh proxy, and off you go. One thing I want to mention, back to sort of tying back into, we don't do everything. We try to keep the ball rolling. The side effect of that is sometimes projects don't always have the very latest details of instructions, and I'll clarify what I mean by that. So here in this building section, we had a very interesting feature that relatively recently was added to the Nexus system, where we can build a car. It's sort of a carafe archive, sort of like a jar, but geared to load up easily and carafe as a bundle. And so now it's very easy to do a Maven clean build with a -p build car flag that will create a bundle file, a .car file. And once that is built, the only thing you need to do to install it is pretty much drop it into the right folder inside your Nexus binary tree, where your Nexus program is located. So this is relatively new. Some of the projects and other format plugins that are out there don't have these instructions updated yet. So if you're really interested in the community and want a quick and easy way to get involved, take a blurb like this that talks about building the car, installing the car, and look at one of the other formats that doesn't mention it yet, and create a pull request. It would be fabulous. Eventually, things like this really should be propagated to all the plugins because they use a similar build infrastructure. So boom, there it is. And of course, in here, there's a link into setting up more about the proxy, the specific details, etc. Okay, let me hop back. And as I mentioned, this particular plugin may end up in the product itself. There's work going on to actually pull that into the product, yeah. So that's just kind of an example of how these things can evolve. So another example is our apt format. This was started, I believe Mike Poindexter worked on this one, started it up. We helped out a little here and there, and this has evolved to the point where there was sufficient demand, and it became clear that this was worth folding into the product itself, and the apt format is now a part of the core Nexus product. So, and that's great. We love to see that happen. It's another example, I think, of something that starts out here in the community. It develops, it evolves, and we find there's value in it, and build it into the product so more people can get value from it. So, excellent. And the code to this, to the implementation, is also going to be open source, even as a part of the core product. So that's a thing that I think benefits everybody, that sort of evolution. So great, fantastic. If you are interested in looking into this particular format, that's great. But be aware that it's coming out in the core product soon. So. Let's see. Oh, this is kind of a project that I like, so I'm going to take a couple seconds to plug it. Nexus installer packages are not all that interesting, not very exciting, but the basic idea here is this project will take our standard Nexus zip bundle and allow it to be wrapped up into an installer, a .deb, a .rpm, and then you can just install updates as well as the original installation via standard yum, apt-get, whatever. And this is a fairly simple project that takes an RPM spec file and uses it to build an RPM, and then we use a Debian tool, alien tool, to take that RPM and generate a deb from it. I'm sure there's better ways to do this, and I'm sure there are many people in the community that have excellent ideas on better ways to improve this sort of thing. So if you have an interest in this, I would strongly encourage you to take a look. The source is here, the spec file's here. Tell us what we can do better. Even better, submit a PR. Would be fabulous. Okay, another good one out here. We've got the code that runs search.maven.org. I'm sure you're familiar that the central repository is a thing that Sonatype maintains, and the front end to that is also open and available here. So if you're interested in how that UI works and what it's doing, take a look. Improvement's always welcome. One other nice thing about the community is it doesn't necessarily have to be all in one language. We're not doing only Java projects out there. And a couple of examples here that are kind of interesting to me, at least, are Rust and Go. So Cargo Pants is a project that makes use of our OSS index service to look at your Rust dependencies and look for known vulnerabilities. It also gives you bill of materials. And this is all written in Rust. It's actually a cargo plugin. So once you build this and do a cargo install, you can just do the Cargo Pants command, and it will automatically scan your Rust project for known vulnerabilities. I'll qualify it that the OSS index data is fabulous data, but it's not as good as our curated data. So on some of these dependency vulnerability sorts of projects, keep in mind that this is a great way to get started, and that there's another level up. If you get our curated data, then you get all sorts of additional details when it comes to identifying vulnerabilities and remediation, etc. So another interesting project I'll jump through is a project called Nancy. This is in Golang. Also uses our OSS index service to check the listed dependencies from your Golang project for known vulnerabilities. Same idea, pull it down, you build it. You can integrate it into CI and make it part of your build system, etc. And it's a great kind of first step as far as vulnerability identification. It's all free. The source is up here. So if somebody's worried about what are you integrating into our build system, so well, this is it. Here's the source. Here's what it does. We know exactly what calls it's making, what it's not making, etc. So I would encourage you to check that out. And again, always room for improvements. This is why we love open source. If you find a better way or an improvement, put up a PR. Love to see that sort of thing happening. Let's see, am I doing on time? No one's yelling at me yet, so I must be getting too close. So those are sort of the publicly visible, or an example of some of the publicly visible things that are happening in the community. There's also some things that aren't so visible that we're working on to try and make it easier to contribute and easier to improve various contributions. First one I would mention is we're working on open sourcing the Nexus Repository Manager Integration Test Framework. And basically the idea here is right now you can create a format. We looked at a few of those, but it's kind of difficult to do thorough integration testing of the format once you have it written and working. Internally, we have a whole bunch of helpful classes that make that much easier to do, but we haven't had a chance yet to get it all published and part of the OSS source repository for the repository manager itself. So we're working on getting those classes to a point where we can go ahead and publish them, and then they will be available at compile time for you to use in writing integration tests of any community formats going forward. So testing, yes, excellent, more of it, good. Along the same lines, Nexus Repository Manager Open Source Edition ships with a whole bunch of formats out of the box. However, a number of the source code modules for the individual formats are not quite yet published in our source repo. And this is sort of a cleanup step. The intention was always to get them published, but bigger fires burn and other things have to get done. So sometimes that falls off the top of the list. So as part of the community work, we're working to get those formats included in the open source repository for Repo Manager so that those are more available. They form, besides being able to have improvements to the formats themselves in that way, they're also a great tool for learning how to write a format, and they're good as sort of source as documentation, as it were. Another project going on that we will hopefully get more visibility going forward, Ahab, a Golang app that will basically check for vulnerabilities in other packaging systems like apt, yum, again, built pulling its vulnerability data from the Sonatype OSS index. So let's see. Those are the big parts I wanted to cover. I guess I don't have a lot of other individual ones. My last slide here, again, a bunch of links. I would encourage you to go out there and poke around, look around, see what projects are there, spin them up, build them, install them, and see what happens. No danger there. You're not prohibited in any way from using any of these contributions, and would encourage you to take them for a spin and give feedback, good, bad, indifferent, PRs, whatever. But again, I think the great power of open source and this sort of an open source community is you really can get the conversation going. You can ask people, am I headed in the right place? And save yourself some time and keep it interesting and keep it fun. Minimize head banging on walls time so that you can get something working and have it doing cool things in the shortest amount of time.